Now, national security law and foreign policy expert Johanna Leblanc joins me on this conversation. Johanna, very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. We certainly do appreciate it. Maybe let's just start off with talking about the overall sentiments of Americans at this point in time as that first cohort of South African white Afrikaners that are about to just land in the US. What's the feeling in the USA currently?
Well, the feeling by particularly human rights groups is they're rather disappointed because, as you know, one of the first steps that Mr. Trump took after he was elected to office is that he suspended the refugees program here in the United States. So pretty much bearing everyone from around the world who face persecution from coming to the United States to seek refuge and safety. However, he lifted that policy to make an exception specifically for white South Afrikaners. So many of the civil rights and human rights groups here in this country are gravely concerned, and they're asking themselves, why is it that the white South Afrikaners rather, get a special exception when you have folks in the DRC, in Sudan, and in Haiti, and in other parts of the world who are actually facing credible fear and persecution?
Most certainly. Maybe let's just touch, Johanna, on the law in terms of the national security law, as well as the vetting of the South Africans that are currently on their way to the US. How would the US balance that humanitarian protection with the risk of resettling individuals without a full vetting process? Do we know how much they were vetted and if any of them still have any pending cases?
Well, according to our domestic laws, they are supposed to be vetted thoroughly before admitted into the United States, and to conduct a proper investigation, to also conduct a background check, and to check various systems and databases to make sure there aren't any outstanding warrants, and to also ensure that there will not be a national security threat to our homeland. And then after that process is done, and only after then they could be considered for admission into the United States. And let me tell you this, the United States has one of the most rigorous processes when it comes to admitting refugees into the United States. So based on our domestic laws, they should have been vetted properly to ensure that none of these refugees could potentially be a national security threat to the homeland.
And how long would that vetting process typically take? Would you say it's been expedited in this particular situation?
I certainly would agree that it has been expedited because usually the process takes a very long time because there are so many different agencies that play a role in this process. It's not just the State Department. We have a Department of Defense that plays a role. You have the FBI, you have the Department of Homeland Security. It's a number of various agencies. And as you know, government can be very bureaucratic, and bureaucracy takes time. And then after that process happens, then the U.S. government contacts various states that will be willing to accept the refugees. So it's done in consultation with state governments and local governments to see who would actually accept those refugees. And in the case of the Afrikaners here in the U.S., the state of Virginia apparently has accepted to receive the 50 plus that will be coming into the United States.
And do you think then, if in case this has been expedited, does it expose the gaps in the U.S. refugee admission system? And can this then further be exploited for political ideologies?
Well, the reality is that the vetting process is done by the United States government, right? Now, the applicants have to submit documentation to show that they have indeed been persecuted by their government, right? In this case, the Afrikaners would have had to submit extensive documents to the U.S. Embassy showing that they have indeed been persecuted. And then that information will then be vetted by the U.S. Embassy to make sure that the information that has been submitted is genuine. And then after that, there is actually an interview that actually takes place by an officer at the U.S. Embassy and the applicant, right? So the fact that this process has been severely expedited, I think what it shows to the rest of the world is that there's no reason why it had taken so long in the past, and that if there is the political will by the government, some of these applications could actually speed up. And I will tell you this, the Department of Homeland Security is behind on so many different immigration cases. I mean, they're behind by hundreds and thousands of cases, in which members of Congress have continuously called for some of these cases to be expedited, and they've provided Congress has provided additional funding to make sure that the process can move a bit faster, right? So I think this tells all of us that perhaps if there is the political will, a lot of the backlog that currently exists within DHS can actually be lifted, and those folks could be admitted into the country properly.
I mean, lastly, when you spoke, Johanna, earlier, you mentioned how when the president came into power, he suspended that the refugee program in the USA, and now having opened this opportunity for white South African Afrikaners. How do you think that adversarial nations would use this in terms of accusing the US of double standards or even just a racial bias with regards to their foreign policy and immigration frameworks?
Yeah, I think that the U.S. has received a great deal of backlash by human rights groups, and certainly by South Africa, who has been very consistent that no such persecution exists. So I think that also it's important for those in the Trump administration to really take the time to really understand the history of South Africa. The history of apartheid. You talk about a system that was one of the most racist systems in the world, where Black people were murdered, killed, and exploited for the benefit of white people in South Africa. So I think it's important to understand that context as the administration is setting up and creating policies that have an impact on South Africa. But I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation between the South African government and the United States. It's going to take a great deal of diplomatic approach to actually come to some form of resolution. But let me tell you this, the decision that has been taken by Mr. Trump is reversible. Because let's say that 4 years from now, Trump were to, the Republicans rather, were to lose the election, and you have a new Democrat president in power, you have a Republican president in power who does not necessarily believe that the basis for providing refugee status to those Afrikaners was actually legitimate. It can be reversed, and they will have to return back to South Africa. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as we move forward. But certainly this decision by the Trump administration is going to further create a strain between the U.S. and South African relations.
Of course, and the South African president, they having had that conversation with the U.S. president, saying to him that there is no such. And of course, South Africa learns from the former president Nelson Mandela, and this is certainly not a place where anyone would be persecuted simply by the color of their skin. Thank you so much for joining us, Johanna Leblanc, a national security law and foreign relations expert, speaking to us there on the back of that 49 cohort of South African Afrikaners who are about to touch ground in the USA in a few hours' time.